Chapter 1. The Boy from Abilene. Before he led armies, before he led a nation. Dwight David Eisenhower was just a small boy. His world was not full of power or fame. It was filled with dust, wind, and wide Kansas skies. Abilene was quiet, but not silent. Trains roared through town. Horses trotted down the dirt roads. The sun burned hot in summer. Snow whispered across the plains in winter. Life moved slowly, but it was never still. Dwight lived in a small house with his mother, father, and 5 brothers. 6 boys, 1 roof. There was never enough space, never enough food, but always enough love. They shared everything: shoes, beds, chores, and dreams. The Eisenhower home was strict. Their father, David, worked at a creamery. He was firm, serious, proud. Their mother, Ida, was gentle but strong. She read the Bible. She taught her boys to think, to feel, to care. Her voice was soft, but her lessons stayed forever. Every morning, Dwight woke before the sun. He helped with the fire, brought in water, and fed the chickens. Then he walked to school, through mud, snow, or heat. No excuses, no complaints. He was not the biggest, not the fastest, but he was strong inside. He listened more than he spoke. He watched. He learned. One day, Dwight wanted to go trick-or-treating. He was 6. His older brothers went without him. He cried. He begged. His parents said no. When the others left, Dwight ran outside, his face red with anger. In the dark, he found a tree. He punched it, again and again, until his fists bled. His mother didn't shout. She wrapped his hands and whispered, "Dwight, anger is natural, but you must learn to control it, or it will control you." He never forgot those words. As Dwight grew, he worked harder. After school, he mowed lawns, carried ice, cleaned stables. Every coin he earned, he saved. Every job taught him something: discipline, patience, grit. He loved books, especially history. He read about wars, kings, and great leaders. But he never thought he'd become one. Not yet. At school, Dwight liked math and science. He wasn't the best student, but he tried. He liked games more: baseball, football, anything with movement, anything with a team. He played to win, but always played fair. Sometimes Dwight got into fights, not for fun, but for justice. If someone bullied a smaller boy, he stepped in, quietly, strongly, and if he got hurt, he didn't cry. He stood back up. As a teenager, Dwight took a job in a creamery. The air was heavy with milk and sweat. His hands ached, his back hurt, but he never gave up. Day after day, year after year, he worked, saved, and dreamed. His dream? To go to college. But money was tight. His older brother, Edgar, wanted to study law. Dwight made a choice. He gave up his chance, so Edgar could go first. That moment said everything about him. Later, an opportunity came. A free education. A place called West Point, the U.S. military academy. He didn't know much about it, but it sounded like a challenge. He liked challenges. He passed the test. Barely. But it was enough. At 20 years old, Dwight left Abilene. He packed a small bag, hugged his family, and boarded a train heading east. As the train pulled away, the town grew smaller until it disappeared. But Abilene never left him. The values, the silence, the storms, the love, they stayed deep inside, in every decision, every moment, for the rest of his life. Because before he led armies, before he led a nation, he was just a boy from Kansas. Chapter 2. Brothers, Books, and Bruises. The Eisenhower house was always full. 6 boys, 1 kitchen, 1 bathroom, 1 table. Laughter often echoed through the walls. So did arguments. But there was something else too, something stronger than the noise. There was love. And there was respect. Dwight was the 3rd son. Not the oldest, not the youngest. He had to fight for attention, but not with fists. He used patience. He waited, he watched, and when he spoke, people listened. His brothers were smart, loud, curious. Each had his own way. Some liked reading, some liked running, some liked teasing. They wrestled in the yard, raced to the store, and argued over chores. They shared shoes, shirts, and secrets. But they also shared bruises, real ones, scraped knees, black eyes, busted lips, nothing cruel, just the rough games of boys growing up. Sometimes it went too far. One winter day, Dwight and Edgar, his older brother, got into a fight. It started small, a disagreement over whose turn it was to chop wood. But tempers rose like fire in dry grass. Words turned sharp. Then fists flew. In seconds, Dwight's face was red and swollen. Edgar's shirt was torn. Their mother rushed in. Her face was calm, but her eyes were not. "Enough," she said. No shouting, no slamming doors, just a firm, quiet voice. That silence hit harder than any punch. The boys sat for hours, side by side, not speaking. Later that night they apologized, not just with words, but with actions. They finished each other's chores. They helped without asking. And they didn't fight again. At least, not like that. Books were a big part of the Eisenhower home. The family didn't have much money, but they had books. Their mother believed reading built character. She read to them when they were young. Later, they read to her. Dwight loved stories about great men, men who led armies, built nations, or stood for justice. He read slowly, carefully. Sometimes he stopped to think about a single sentence. What did it mean? Why did it matter? One night, he read about George Washington. He turned the page slowly, candlelight dancing on his face. "I must learn to obey before I can lead," the words said. He paused. His fingers stayed on the page. He didn't say anything, but something inside him shifted. School was another place where Dwight learned. He wasn't the top of the class. He didn't always finish his work on time, but teachers noticed him. He paid attention. He asked good questions. And when someone else spoke, he listened. Really listened. He loved math. Numbers made sense. They followed rules. They didn't lie. But he also liked history. The past, he thought, had something to teach the present. Outside the classroom, he was full of energy. He ran everywhere. He played baseball until the sun disappeared behind the hills. He threw rocks with perfect aim. He climbed trees so high his brothers shouted for him to come down. One summer, he fell from a branch. His leg hit the ground hard. The pain was sharp and sudden. For weeks, he limped. But he never stopped moving. Even with a bandage, he raced his brothers. He hated losing, but he never cheated. Sunday was different. The house was quieter. The boys wore clean shirts. They walked to church in a long line, like soldiers. Inside, they sat straight. Their mother's hand rested gently on Dwight's shoulder. Her touch was light, but it kept him still. After lunch, they sometimes read scripture together. Dwight didn't always understand the words, but he felt something deep, something quiet. As the years passed, Dwight changed. His shoulders grew broad, his voice deepened. But inside, he stayed steady, like a stone in a river. One day, a bully pushed a smaller boy at school. No one moved, but Dwight stepped forward. He didn't shout, he didn't hit. He stood between them, like a wall. His eyes said enough. The bully backed away. Later, the younger boy whispered, "Thank you." Dwight just nodded. He never wanted attention. He wanted justice. His father, David, noticed the change. One evening, as they sat on the porch, he said, "You have strength, son, but real strength isn't loud." Dwight didn't answer. He just looked at the stars and thought. The Eisenhower family had little money, but they had pride. They fixed what was broken. They made things last. They ate every crumb, and they thanked God for it. Dwight shined shoes for extra pennies. He delivered vegetables. He worked after school until the sky turned orange, not because anyone forced him. He wanted to help. He wanted to grow. In the quiet moments, late at night, alone in his room, he sometimes wondered about the future. Would he stay in Abilene forever? Would he become a teacher, a farmer, a soldier? He didn't know. But he knew this. He wanted to be useful. He didn't care about being famous. He didn't need medals or power, but he wanted his life to mean something good. Years later, someone asked him, "What made you strong?" He smiled and said, "6 brothers, 1 bookcase, and a few bruises." Chapter 3. A Young Man with a Mission. He looked at the train ticket in his hand. The paper was thin. The words were simple. But for Dwight, it felt like a key, a door to something bigger. He stood on the platform holding a small bag. His eyes stared down the tracks. His heart beat faster. The train came loud, steady, full of steam. He stepped on. The journey had begun. West Point. It sounded like a place from a story. Stone buildings, green fields, men in uniforms marching with purpose. For Dwight, it was more than a school. It was a chance, a mission, a test. He didn't come for money. He didn't have special connections. But he had something else. Something inside. A quiet promise to himself. I will give everything. The days were long. The rules were strict. No sleeping in, no excuses, no laziness. Every morning he rose before the sun. He made his bed so tightly a coin could bounce on it. He shined his boots until they reflected his face. He stood in line, straight and silent, waiting for orders. The classes were hard. Mathematics, engineering, tactics. He struggled at first. His mind raced, but sometimes the answers stayed just out of reach. Others did better. Smarter cadets earned praise. But Dwight didn't quit. Not once. At night, while others rested, he studied. Page by page, word by word. He didn't rise to the top. Not yet. But something deeper grew in him. A sense of control. A way to keep going, even when everything felt too heavy. He also loved sports. Football was his passion. He played with fire in his chest. Fast, fearless, focused. The game gave him balance, a way to push his body when his mind needed rest. But one day, everything changed. A hit, a sharp pain. He fell. The doctors gave bad news. His knee was damaged. He could never play again. For a moment, he broke inside. He had dreamed of glory on the field. That dream was gone, but he didn't let it stop him. Instead, he found a new path. He helped coach the team. He studied strategy. He supported others. He still showed up, early, ready, strong. He smiled through the pain. Quietly, others began to notice. Not because he shouted, not because he bragged, but because he stood tall, even in silence. He made friends, good ones, not just classmates, but men who would walk beside him in battle one day. They studied together, marched side by side, laughed in the few soft moments they had. Sometimes, late at night, they talked about the future. Would there be war? Would they lead men into danger? No one knew. But Dwight listened, always. His mind was a sponge. He learned from books and from people. He watched his instructors carefully, how they spoke, how they moved, how they made decisions. Slowly, he started to think like a leader. One summer, he went home to Abilene. The house felt smaller. The streets seemed quiet. He was taller now, leaner. His shoulders carried more than before. He helped his father fix the fence. He sat with his mother on the porch. She looked into his eyes and said, "You're different, Dwight." He smiled. "Maybe just more serious," he said. She held his hand. "That's not a bad thing." Back at West Point, the final year arrived. The tests were harder. The pressure was heavier. Every move mattered. One mistake could ruin everything. But Dwight had learned something over time. Something many did not. He had learned to stay calm. While others panicked, he planned. While others rushed, he paused. He had seen storms before, on the plains, in his heart, in the eyes of angry teammates. He knew storms passed. In those last months, he began to shine. Not the brightest, not the loudest, but the clearest. In group exercises, others turned to him. His voice was firm. His ideas made sense. Even the instructors nodded. He wasn't first in his class, but he had become something better. He had become steady. When graduation day came, Dwight wore his uniform with pride. The brass buttons, the sharp collar, the golden bars on his shoulders. His family sat in the crowd. His father stood tall. His mother wiped a tear. His brothers cheered. He saluted the flag. His chest was full, not just with pride, but with purpose. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. He had a new rank, a new title. Second Lieutenant Dwight David Eisenhower. But he wasn't thinking about medals or parades. He was thinking about what came next. Where would he go? Who would he serve? How would he prove himself? He didn't know yet, but he was ready. The world was changing. The winds of war were rising. Nations were watching one another closely. Somewhere out there, men were making plans, drawing lines on maps, preparing for things no one could fully understand. And Dwight? He was waiting, watching, training, not with fear, but with quiet focus. He knew his time would come, and when it did, he would be ready. Chapter 4. Learning to lead. The uniform was the same. The world was not. After West Point, Dwight entered a new chapter. The Army sent him to small places at first, far from fame, far from battle. But he didn't complain. Every day he reported for duty. He kept his boots clean, his notes sharp, his mind alert. At first he followed. Others gave orders. He carried them out. He did not speak loudly. He didn't try to impress. Instead, he watched. He paid attention to the small things, how a leader gave instructions, how a man reacted under stress, how decisions were made when lives were on the line. He served under many officers. Some were wise, some were proud, some were careless, but every one of them taught him something. Even the worst leaders left lessons. He wrote them down. He never forgot them. One officer stood out, General Fox Connor. He wasn't famous, but he was smart, very smart. He saw something in Dwight, something hidden, quiet, steady. He took him under his wing. They talked for hours. About war, about history, about peace. General Connor believed that war should be the last choice, never the first. He said a good leader never rushed, never acted in anger. Dwight listened carefully. The words sank deep. Under Connor's guidance, Dwight read more. Thick books, old battles, great speeches. Sometimes his eyes burned with tiredness, but he kept reading. One night, he stayed up until dawn, not because he had to, but because he wanted to understand. Leadership, he learned, was not just power. It was timing. It was kindness. It was courage in silence. Time passed. Dwight moved from post to post. He met men from every corner of the country. Some were brave, some were afraid. Some followed easily, others did not. He learned to speak with purpose, not too fast, not too slow. He learned to listen before he acted. When soldiers had a problem, he didn't dismiss it. He looked them in the eyes. He asked questions. He found the truth. Slowly, his name began to travel. quiet whispers. That officer, he's sharp, keeps calm under pressure, knows his stuff. Still, no medals, no headlines. But he didn't need them. In Panama, he faced heat so thick it felt like soup. In Texas, the dust storms covered everything. In the Philippines, he worked under General MacArthur. The general was bold, confident, hard to please, but Dwight stayed calm. He learned from him too, even when the work was tough, even when days stretched long and tempers ran short. He missed home sometimes. He wrote letters to his wife, Mamie. She was his anchor. Her words brought warmth. They had a son, John. The boy's photo stayed in Dwight's wallet. In dark hours, that photo reminded him why he served. In every new role, the responsibilities grew. He trained troops. He planned exercises. He wrote reports. He stayed organized. He stayed ready. He started to think like a strategist. He imagined maps in his mind. Where would the enemy strike? How could his men respond? What if the weather changed? What if supplies ran out? He didn't guess. He prepared. By now, war was in the air. Europe was tense. Hitler was rising. Armies moved like thunder across borders. People hoped for peace, but feared the worst. America watched. The world waited. In that time between peace and war, Dwight worked harder than ever. He trained soldiers to think, not just shoot. He pushed for discipline, but also fairness. He wanted every man to believe in the mission, not just follow orders blindly. One evening, during a field exercise, a young recruit froze. The sounds of fake gunfire filled the air. The boy dropped to the ground, trembling. Others laughed, but not Dwight. He walked over, knelt beside him, spoke softly. "You're scared?" he asked. The boy nodded. "It's okay," Dwight said. "So was I, the first time." The boy looked up, surprised. "Courage," Dwight whispered, "isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward, even when you feel it." The boy stood again. That night, Dwight wrote in his journal, "A leader must never forget what it feels like to be the smallest man in the line." He never did. As the years moved forward, the world edged closer to disaster. Nations broke promises. Borders burned. Battles exploded far away. But the sound was growing louder. And somewhere in that growing noise, a quiet voice prepared. A man from Kansas, a soldier, a student of war and peace. He was not chasing glory. He was building something, inside himself, a foundation. Because when the call came, and it would, he knew what he had to be. Ready, strong, wise. Chapter 5. The Storm Before D-Day. The world was shaking. Cities burned, ships crossed dark seas, planes roared above broken lands, men waited, cold, tired, silent. The war had spread like wildfire. Fear lived in every corner, but so did courage. It was 1944. Dwight David Eisenhower sat at a small table. Maps covered the walls, lines, arrows, numbers, names. He had studied them for months. Every road, every beach, every bridge. He knew what had to be done. But still, he hesitated. The weather was bad. Clouds thickened. Rain hit the windows. The sea tossed like an angry beast. Could soldiers land in that storm? Could ships survive the waves? He listened to the weathermen. Some said wait. Some said go. Time was slipping away. Every hour mattered. Every moment could change history. He closed his eyes, took a breath, then stood. We go. 3 words. That was it. The room went quiet. Pens stopped. Radios crackled. Men looked at each other, then nodded. It was time. Across England, soldiers climbed into trucks. Planes lined the fields. Boats waited at docks. Faces young and old, eyes full of thought. Some smiled, some prayed, some wrote letters they would never send. Eisenhower visited them before they left. He didn't wear stars or speak like a general. He spoke like a man. One soldier asked him, "Will it be bad, sir?" He looked straight at him. "It will be hard," he said, "but we'll get through it. Together." The soldier nodded. That night, rain fell like stones. Wind screamed through the trees. Still, the soldiers marched. Eisenhower didn't sleep. He sat alone, staring at the clock, every second louder than the last. In his hand was a note, a small card. On it, he had written words no one else had seen. "If the landings fail," it said, "the fault is mine alone." He was ready to take the blame. Every loss, every mistake, he carried it all. Dawn broke. June 6th, D-Day. The beaches of Normandy waited, wide, open, deadly. German guns pointed toward the sea. Traps lay hidden beneath the sand. The enemy was strong, ready, cruel. But so were the Allies. Thousands of planes flew overhead. Paratroopers jumped into the dark. Some landed far from their targets. Some were lost before they touched the ground. Yet they kept moving. Boats crashed onto the shore. The doors dropped. Water filled with gunfire. Men ran forward, through waves, through fear, through chaos. Eisenhower couldn't see it, but he felt it. He stayed in his command post, hands tight behind his back. Reports came in slowly. Some said things were going well. Others said disaster. It was too early to know, too early to breathe. He waited. Hours passed. Then, a whisper of hope. One beach secured, then another, slowly, inch by inch. The Allies pushed forward. It wasn't easy. It wasn't clean. It was hard, bloody, and long. But it was working. The plan, his plan, was holding. Later that day, he stood by the window. His face showed no joy, no pride, only relief. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands. Behind him, officers spoke quietly. No celebration, not yet. too many men still in danger. That evening, Eisenhower wrote letters to families who had lost sons. He chose his words carefully, not as a commander, as a father, a human, a man who had asked others to risk everything. He knew this was just the beginning. France was not yet free. The war was not yet over. But a door had opened, a path to victory, carved with bravery and sacrifice. Many had doubted him. Some had wanted a different leader. But Eisenhower had stayed firm. He had believed in the mission, in the men, in the dream of peace. D-Day became a turning point. The world would remember the storm, the fear, the courage, the beaches filled with fire, and the silence after. And behind it all, the man who gave the order. Not for glory, not for fame, but because he believed it was right. Because he knew the cost of waiting too long. Because he had learned long ago that leadership means standing still when others run, speaking calmly when others shout, holding on, even when the whole world shakes. In the days that followed, the Allies moved through France, town by town, field by field. Eisenhower guided them, not with a sword, but with a plan, clear, focused, strong. The soldiers never forgot him. Not because he stood above them, but because he stood with them. Because when the night was darkest, he lit the way. Chapter 6. The Longest Day. The sky was still dark when the first boots hit the sand. The wind blew sharp across the waves. Salt stung eyes. The roar of engines mixed with the crash of water. Hundreds of boats moved forward, steady, slow, and full of fear. Soldiers held their breath. Some whispered prayers. Others stayed silent, gripping their weapons. Many had never seen war this close, and now they were stepping into its fire. The coast of Normandy stretched wide before them, open, exposed, dangerous. On the cliffs above, enemy guns waited. Bullets tore through the air, explosions shook the ground. The beach was no place to hide, but they ran. Through the surf, through the screams, through the thick smoke. The plan had started. D-Day had begun. Eisenhower watched from afar, not with his eyes, but with his mind, his heart, his soul. He had ordered the attack. Now others carried it forward. Every name mattered to him. Every soldier was a son, a brother, a friend. He didn't see numbers. He saw faces. He felt each loss like a blow. Reports came in slowly. Static filled the radios. Messages cut in and out. Some beaches had broken defenses. Others were trapped. Men were pinned down. Boats sank. Paratroopers landed in the wrong fields. But still, they fought. Some crawled through barbed wire. Some dragged the wounded to safety. Others climbed cliffs under fire. They didn't stop. Even when everything told them to turn back, they went forward. The sea turned red. Sand turned to mud. But so many kept moving. At headquarters, Eisenhower stood still. He didn't pace. He didn't shout. He waited. 1 hour passed, then 2, then more. A phone rang. A brief report. Progress on one beach. Another came, and another. The tide was turning. He exhaled. Not victory, not yet, but hope. That day, the world watched. Not all the landings went well. Some units were scattered. Others faced heavy fire. Leaders fell. Young soldiers stepped up. They gave orders. They led men. They acted without fear, even when afraid. That was courage. One young man carried 2 friends to cover. He had been shot in the leg. He kept going. When asked why, he said, "Because I couldn't leave them." A medic held a man's hand as he died. No words were needed, just presence. Another soldier, shaking with fear, found the strength to charge a machine gun nest. He saved his team. Stories like these filled the day. They filled Eisenhower's heart. He had spent months planning, each detail checked and rechecked. But war has no script, no perfect move, only people, and the choices they make in the worst moments. By sunset, the beaches were held. Not cleanly, not perfectly, but held. Flags were planted, wounded were carried back, the dead were counted, letters were written, medals would come later, but no medal could match the cost. Eisenhower stepped outside. The sky was deep orange. The wind was quiet now. Somewhere in the distance, a bugle sounded. He thought of those who didn't return, their names, their faces. He thought of the letters he would write. He thought of the mothers, the children left behind. He didn't cry. Not then. But inside, something broke. Leadership is heavy. That day, it felt like a mountain. A staff member handed him the first full report. He took it, nodded, and sat down alone. He knew the battle was only the start. France still waited. The war was far from finished. But this was a beginning. That night, he didn't sleep. He read every name he could. He circled numbers, marked maps, but his thoughts drifted back to the beach, the sand, the steel, the silence after the storm. D-Day was history now. But it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. Too many had paid the price, and he had sent them. He had known the risk, but knowing did not make it easier. He lit a cigarette. His hand trembled slightly. A general saw and looked away. Not out of shame, but out of respect. They all felt it. The weight, the cost, the quiet truth behind the uniforms. Later, Eisenhower spoke to his team. "We did it," he said. "But remember, this is only the first step, and it came with blood. No cheers, no applause, just silence. And a deep understanding of what came next. Each man in that room carried something different now. Not just maps, not just radios, but a duty, a promise to those who fell, to finish the mission. Outside, the night air grew colder, but inside Eisenhower, a fire stayed lit. Not anger, not pride, but purpose. He had seen war with clear eyes. He had sent men into darkness, and they had brought back light. It was, without question, the longest day, but it would be remembered forever. Chapter 7. After the guns fell silent. The sky was blue again. Smoke faded. Cities stood quiet. Guns stopped firing. Soldiers walked, not to battle, but home. The war was over. In towns across Europe, bells rang. Flags waved. Children ran into the streets. People cried. People danced. In America, families waited by the door. They looked at photographs. They read letters again and again. Some would never see their loved ones return. Others held tight when sons stepped off trains. Dwight David Eisenhower stood among them. Not in uniform now, not at the front. But in heart, he was still with every soldier. He had seen too much. He had ordered too much. But he had brought victory. The world called him a hero. His name was everywhere. Newspapers, radios, banners in parades. But he didn't smile easily. Not yet. He remembered the cost. Every medal reminded him of someone lost. Every cheer echoed with silence from a grave. He traveled across Europe after the surrender, not to celebrate, but to witness. He walked through cities torn apart. He saw buildings turned to dust. He met children with no shoes. He saw hunger, fear, and something else. He saw hope. In Germany, he visited the camps, the ones built to kill. He saw what evil had done. Eyes empty, rooms full of shoes. No words were enough, only silence. He returned to his room that night and stared at the wall. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he whispered, "The world must never forget this." And it didn't. When he came back to the United States, the people cheered. Crowds waited for hours just to see him. Some reached out to shake his hand. Others simply looked at him, with eyes full of thanks. But peace brought problems too. The war had ended, but peace was complicated. Nations rebuilt. Old friends became rivals. The world split into sides. The Soviet Union rose. Tension grew. New dangers replaced old ones. It was no longer tanks and trenches. It was secrets, spies, and silent threats. People were afraid again. And at home, change was in the air. Factories had been busy with war. Now they had to switch to peace. Jobs were needed. Homes were needed. Veterans needed help. Black Americans came back from war and asked, "Where is our freedom?" Voices rose. Some wanted things to stay the same. Others wanted something better. The country needed someone steady. Someone who had seen fear, but never gave in. Someone who understood war and wanted peace. People turned to Eisenhower. At first, he said no. He wasn't a politician. He didn't care for speeches or parties. He had served the army, not a campaign. But the pressure grew. Leaders asked, citizens begged. The letters came by the thousands. One note said, "You led us in war. We need you now in peace." He thought of Mamie, his wife. They had moved often. She had followed him across oceans. She wanted rest. So did he. But rest would have to wait. He saw what was coming. A divided world. A changing nation. A future that needed careful hands. Finally, he agreed. He would run. Not for power, not for fame, but for duty. The campaign began. He smiled more. He shook hands. He stood on stages. The signs read, "I like Ike." It became a chant, a promise. Children learned his name. Families hoped again. He didn't shout. He didn't attack others. He spoke clearly. He spoke with care. He promised strength. He promised peace. He promised to serve, not rule. In 1952, the people voted. The results were clear. He won. The man who once played football in muddy fields, who walked through dust storms in Kansas, who led millions through the worst war in history, was now President of the United States. He stood on the steps of the Capitol. The cold wind brushed his face. He raised his hand, swore the oath, and stepped into the next fight, not with weapons, but with words, with ideas, with courage, and with the same quiet strength he had carried all his life. Behind the smile was the weight of the world. But he had carried it before, and he was ready to carry it again. Chapter 8. Mr. President. He stood before the crowd, hand raised, eyes steady. The Bible rested on a small table. The wind moved through the flags. His voice was calm, yet full of power. "I do solemnly swear." With those words, Dwight David Eisenhower became the president. It was 1953. The world watched. A soldier had become a leader of peace, a man of war, now sworn to guide a nation through tension without battle. The Cold War was not hot, but it burned with danger. East and West stood apart, watching, waiting, fearing the worst. Inside the White House, Eisenhower took his seat behind the famous desk. Not made of gold, not shining with jewels, just wood, smooth and heavy, like the choices he would soon make. Each day brought a new challenge. Each hour, a choice. He studied reports. He met with advisors. He read letters from citizens. Some begged for help. Others offered advice. A few simply said, "Good luck." He smiled at those, but he knew luck was not enough. He needed patience. He needed wisdom. and he needed the strength to act when others were afraid. He had seen fear before. He had seen it in battlefields and in eyes of soldiers too young to be there. Now he saw it again, in newspapers, in protests, in parents wondering if their children were safe. Nuclear weapons changed everything. One wrong move could destroy cities. He did not speak with panic. He spoke with balance. Yes, he said, we must prepare for war, but we must pray for peace. He kept the military strong, but he never wanted to use it. He knew the cost. He had lived the cost. While leading the world, he also looked inward. His own country had cracks. Black Americans were asking for justice. They had fought in war. Now they fought for rights. Schools were not equal. Laws were not fair. Some told him to wait. He chose to act. He sent troops to protect children entering a school in the South. Their skin was different, but their dreams were the same. He said the law must be for everyone. Many were angry. Some called him weak. Others said he did too little. But he kept going, step by step. Not for praise, but for what was right. He also looked at the roads. Cars filled the streets. Towns were growing fast. But travel was slow, dangerous, messy. He imagined something better. A network of highways, fast, strong, safe. Not just for cars, but for emergencies, for defense, for the future. He signed the plan, the biggest of its kind. Soon, roads stretched across the nation. People could move, business could grow, help could arrive faster. He wasn't building concrete. He was building connection. He spoke to other nations too. He warned about fear, about too many weapons, about the dangers of hate. He asked people to think, to listen, to hope. In private, he worried. He had heart problems. His health was not perfect. But every morning he rose. He shook hands. He read papers. He walked with Mamie in the garden. Her voice calmed him. Her laughter reminded him of days before the storm. They had grown older, but love had stayed young. Together, they watched the world change. One day, a satellite flew through space. Another day, a war began in a far-off land. He had to make choices. Fast, but smart. He didn't want more blood. He wanted understanding. But understanding is not easy. Some allies disagreed with him. Some enemies mocked him. His hair turned gray. His back ached. Still, he carried on. He gave speeches that were short, but deep. He used simple words, not to sound small, but to be clear. He believed truth should not be hidden behind big sentences. Before every big talk, he would think about the farmers back home. Would they understand this? Would they care? If the answer was no, he would rewrite. Because he believed in people. Not just power, not just plans, but the people who woke early, worked hard, and asked only for a fair chance. He saw himself in them, even as president. One day, near the end of his second term, he sat by the window. The sun was low. The leaves were turning. He whispered to himself, 8 years, and still more to do. But his time was ending. The people would choose another. He didn't fear that. He welcomed it. Because he knew real leaders serve, then step aside. Power is not forever, but character is. He gave one last message. He warned about too much military spending. He spoke of the military-industrial complex. He said, "We must guard against the rise of power that grows too far from the people." His words were quiet, but they echoed. They still do. He left the White House not with cheers, but with deep respect. He did not seek riches. He returned to his farm. He watched birds. He read books. He answered letters from school children. Some asked, "Was it hard to be president?" He smiled and wrote, "Yes, but worth it." Because every day he tried. Not to be perfect, but to be honest. And when the world asked for calm, he gave it. When it needed strength, he gave that too. Not with fire, but with steady hands, with faith, with peace. Chapter 9. Warnings and Farewells. The days grew shorter. The wind carried the sound of change. Dwight David Eisenhower stood at the edge of his final chapter as president. He did not rush. He did not shout. He prepared, not with grand shows, but with thought, quiet, steady, like always. His hair was white now, his steps slower, but his mind stayed sharp. He had seen the world in flames. He had helped it find peace. And now, as he prepared to step down, he had one last duty, to speak. Not just to his team, not just to leaders, but to the people, to everyone. He sat in his study, pen in hand. Around him, papers piled high. Each one a draft, a try, a new way to say what needed to be said. The words had to be right. Not too many, not too soft, not too late. He thought about the future. Not his, but theirs. The next president, the next generation. The children not yet born. What kind of world would they live in? He had seen how fast peace could vanish. He had watched nations fall to fear. He knew how power could grow until it became dangerous. Not just enemy power, but their own. He looked out the window. Snow rested on the trees. The garden he once walked with Mamie was sleeping now. Even the birds seemed quiet. He turned back to the desk. He began to write. He warned of something new, something hidden. A danger inside the very system that had helped win the war. He called it the military-industrial complex. A name strange and cold. But the meaning was not. It was the bond between government, weapons, and money. He feared it could grow too strong, too fast, too far. If not watched, if not questioned. He wrote, "We must guard against the unwarranted influence." Strong words, hard truth. But he believed it. He knew the cost of silence. He had seen how easy it was for nations to lose their way. He didn't say, "Do nothing." He didn't say, "Be weak." He said, "Be careful." He said, "Think." He said, "Remember who we are." Not just a country of armies, a country of families, of workers, of ideas. He believed in balance, strength and peace, power and restraint. He wanted the people to stay awake, to keep watch, to protect freedom not just with weapons, but with wisdom. The speech was ready. On the night he gave it, the room was still. No crowd, no banners, just a camera. Just his voice. His eyes looked into the lens like he was speaking to every kitchen table, every classroom, every porch across the land. He didn't need volume. His voice carried weight. Not loud, but strong. He said farewell. He thanked the people. He warned them too. He asked them to stay united, to be thoughtful, to keep the peace they had earned, so painfully, so slowly. When he finished, he sat back in his chair. He looked down, then up. The message was sent. The room stayed silent for a long time. The speech echoed far beyond Washington. Some didn't understand it. Some didn't want to hear it. But others listened. In the days that followed, he prepared to leave the White House. He packed books, photos, letters. He walked through halls filled with memory. Every corner held a story. He said goodbye to the guards, to the cooks, to the gardeners. He thanked them one by one. No flash, no noise, just kindness. On his last morning as president, he stood at the door. Mamie stood beside him. She smiled gently, her hand in his. They had walked this path together. Through war, through peace. Now it was time to rest. As the car pulled away, Eisenhower looked back once, just once. Then he turned forward, toward home, back to the farm, back to the land. He had given so much. he had led with care. And now he left not with power, but with grace. He left with a warning. He left with hope. And the country, though unsure of the road ahead, had been changed by the man who had walked with steady feet through fire and storm, and finally into quiet. Chapter 10. A Life Remembered. The farm was quiet. Morning light touched the fields. Birds called gently from the trees. The wind moved through the grass like a whisper. Dwight David Eisenhower sat on the porch. A blanket covered his knees. His hands, once strong and steady, now rested softly in his lap. He was older, slower, but still present. He looked out over the land. This was peace. No crowds, no flashing cameras, just soil, sky, and stillness. He had seen many things: joy, pain, victory, loss. But here, among the hills and trees, the noise of the world faded. He drank his coffee slowly. Every sip held memory. He thought of his mother reading by lamplight. He thought of his brothers, laughing, fighting, learning. He remembered dusty roads, frozen mornings, long walks to school. The boy from Kansas, still inside him. He thought of West Point, of long nights with heavy books, of football fields and scraped knees, of friends made in silence and steel. He had never planned to be famous. He only wanted to serve. Then came the war. He remembered faces, some lost, some saved. He remembered the sound of boots in mud, of engines in the sky, of silence after battle. He saw again the beaches, the cold, the fear, the courage. He had led not with a sword, but with decisions. He carried responsibility like armor. And when peace returned, he tried to build something better. Not perfect, but better. He gave 8 years to the White House. Not to rule, to guide. He never forgot the people. He spoke to them simply. He wanted them to understand. He believed that truth belonged to everyone, not just to the powerful. He protected freedom, but he also warned of danger. He believed real strength lived in restraint. Now, far from those days, he remembered it all. The letters he wrote, the promises he kept, the tears he did not show. He watched Mamie in the kitchen. She hummed an old tune. Her steps were careful, but graceful. She smiled at him. They had walked through life side by side. She was his light, his anchor, his peace. They had lost a child long ago. The pain never left. But they had carried it together. In the afternoons, he read history, nature, stories of courage. He answered letters from strangers. He wrote back to school children. His words were short, but kind. Some called him great. He never said it. He didn't seek praise. He wanted the world to be steady, fair, and free. One day, a reporter asked, "How do you want to be remembered?" He paused, then said, "As someone who tried." That was enough for him. When his health declined, the world watched again. Hospitals, machines, visitors came, old friends, leaders, soldiers. They held his hand. They thanked him. He said little, but his eyes spoke for him. They said, "I remember." They said, "I am proud of you." They said, "Keep going." And finally, his heart slowed. The room fell still. He was gone, but not lost. Across the nation, flags were lowered. Crowds gathered. Old uniforms came out of closets. Veterans stood straight. Children asked questions. Who was he? What did he do? Why does he matter? And the answers came. He was a son of Kansas. He led the world through war. He held the country during uneasy peace. He stood for calm. He stood for justice. He believed in duty, and he never gave up. His body was buried with honor, but his spirit lived on. In highways that connect cities, in schools that open their doors to all, in words spoken with care, in choices made with courage. Every time a voice says, "Do the right thing," even when it's hard, his legacy grows. Every time a leader listens, not for praise, but for truth, he is there, in the quiet strength of the humble, in the firm steps of the brave, in the steady hands of those who build instead of destroy. He left no palace, no crown, no monument of gold. He left values, character, and a path others could walk. His name is written in books, but his example is written in lives, the lives of those who remember. That leadership is not noise, it is service. That courage is not always fire. Sometimes it is quiet. And that history is not only what we read, it is what we choose to become. Dwight David Eisenhower. He began as a boy with dusty shoes. He ended as a man whose footsteps echo in peace.